This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome to The Clash, where we take a Christian worldview, allow it to clash into the culture around us, and when we're done, hopefully we say something that will educate, entertain, maybe enlighten just a little bit, and if anything else, have a good time and help you in your journey of faith. I'm Jeff Dixon. I get to sit in this chair because the guy over here says I'm allowed to do that. And I don't want to mess with him. He scares me sometimes, but it is one and only Chris Whaley. We call him the Saint. How you doing, Chris?
Doing good. Don't worry. You're not in my HOA.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are we doing today? What are we talking about?
Today, let me just say, today on The Clash, we welcome a man who has spent years sitting across from some of the biggest names in Christian entertainment, ministry, film, and music. From artists and actors to athletes and faith leaders, our guest has heard some incredible stories of struggle, redemption, purpose. He is the voice behind Kingdom Builder. And today we're going behind the microphone with my friend Jay Heilman to hear what he has learned from the guests who have impacted him the most. Jay, welcome to The Clash.
Yeah.
It is great to have you, man.
Oh, so gentlemen, we meet again. It's great to be on here with you guys.
I know. I mean, after that introduction, I can't figure out why Jay's even wanted to talk to us. So, I mean, it's kind of like, we're kind of like bottom feeders, I think, in the grand scheme of what we're doing here.
We're not bottom feeders. We're not bottom feeders.
Jay, I'm thrilled you're here.
Okay.
It's good to see you, man.
Well, I've had that. I'm going to let you start it off. Let you go ahead and ask.
Well,
the question.
let's just ask a generic question first, because again, just tell us a little bit about Kingdom Builder. I mean, what is Kingdom Builder?
So I found Jesus in 2003, and I had always wanted to get into broadcasting and everything. So naturally, I went right into creating a website, and we did like Christian music review stuff. We would review the latest Christian music projects, and just anything that anybody sent us, really. And about 4 or 5 years into that process, I'm like, I'd like to really put those skills that I learned, trying to get into broadcasting into play. And so in 2008, I actually got, it's really strange. I mean, this is like kind of like the biggest interview you can get as your first interview. But I remember getting an email in early January 2008 asking me if I wanted to interview action superstar Dolph Lundgren for a movie that he had done called The Final Inquiry. And of course, I grew up, watching Rocky and, He-Man, The Masters of the Universe was like my favorite movie. And I'm like, sure, but I was like incredibly nervous. And so that was like kind of being thrown into shark-infested waters. Like it's either sink or swim here. So that was my very first interview. So Kingdom Builder started in 2008 with that interview. Wow. We kind of went through the years. My first 5 interviews were like really big ones. I had Kirk Cameron when he did the Fireproof movie. I think I had Mike Nawrocki, who voices Larry the Cucumber in the VeggieTales series. And then it kind of went on from there. I mean, I've been doing this. I look back and I can't believe I've been doing this for 18 years now. Wow. And it's just, it's been a blast. And, I've lost count of how many guests I've had, but it's definitely been fun. And, God continues to open doors for me and my team at, both Today's Christian Entertainment and Kingdom Builder. Over the last 22 years, I've been in the Christian music industry.
Well, let me ask you, just get right into it. Over the years, Jay, which guest surprised you the most?
That's a tough one. I guess I'm not really surprised so much when I do the interviews because I do quite a bit of research because, one of my goals is when I'm doing the interviews is I don't want to ask the same question that maybe they've been asked 100 times before. So I try to come up with new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I am surprised with is, and this has been really the impression I've got from many of the guests I've had over the years is usually the bigger the name, the nicer and more down to earth that they are. I mean, a lot of people, when they think of interviewing celebrities or meeting people, they think, okay, well, they're not really going to care that they're interviewing with you or anything like that. But one thing I've found over the past, 18 years in doing this is that the real big names are the ones that are actually the nicest. I think one of the ones that really stood out to me, because it was a really big interview for me, was Dennis Quaid. I had interviewed him for, I believe it was a country music project, so it wasn't even a movie. It was something that he was doing singing. And first off, I didn't realize he even sang.
Yeah.
But he was such a down-to-earth guy, very humble, very nice. He even, I think he even said happy birthday to my mom because I was interviewing him on my mom's birthday. So he was just an incredibly cool guy. And I told him, I said, I grew up watching you on the movie screen. Frequency was my favorite movie that he did with Jim Caviezel and stuff. So that was probably the most memorable one of recent memory. I think that was like maybe 2-3 years ago, but so many other ones. I mean, there's so many people that I've been able to talk to. I talked to Daniel Roebuck recently. We were talking about that pre-interview, and he's such a cool guy. I mean, just listening to his stories about working in Hollywood for the last 40 years, and it was just such a cool experience, and it's always a cool experience, especially with movie stars, being able to kind of ask them questions about those stories about being in the films and stuff, especially films that you like. It's always helpful that you get to talk to them about a movie that you actually like. So it's pretty cool.
Right. Okay.
Have you ever been interviewing somebody and all of a sudden their response has just been so unexpected that it just left you kind of slack-jawed or stunned you where you were just not prepared for what you heard and you had to kind of regroup or take that long pause before you pick back up? I mean, did anybody drop a bombshell or you just went, what are we doing?
Not really, because when I do interviews, most of my stuff is pre-recorded and stuff, so I don't do anything really live. I have done stuff live on the radio. I've done stuff live in person, like on Facebook Live, but most of the stuff is pre-recorded. So the power of editing helps me get past those points. But I would say that one conversation I remember having years ago, and this really stuck with me because this was another actor that I had grown up watching on TV and in film and everything. But I had the opportunity to interview Corbin Burnson years and years ago for a movie he did called Rust. And it was his first foray into faith-based films. And I just remember the conversation I had with him during that interview. He was very critical about the church and everything. And after we were done with our initial interview, I only had, I think, 15 minutes scheduled with him. But him and I stayed on that phone call for 45 minutes after that. And I was just being able to witness to him, answer questions about faith and everything to him. And it was such a profound conversation because I wasn't prepared for that. I was just prepared to ask him the general questions like, hey, what's this movie about? What's the message you want to get out? What do you hope people take away from it, kind of thing? Because that's usually what the questions boil down to when I talk to people about film. But that was just an incredible conversation that I just was not ready for. But, God really put me in that position to be able to kind of witness to him because he was new to the faith-based film scene. I think this was like 2010. And I've just seen his career in faith-based film progress over the years, being even more bold with his faith and everything in the films that he's making. So I'd like to think that conversation was probably one of the most meaningful early conversations I had because of the impact that it had on him and just reassuring him that not all Christians are as critical about things as the ones that he had encountered. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing, but I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does, yeah.
Well, I was a big L.A. Law fan, so he was on L.A. Law, and And then I love that. I shouldn't, but I love that movie Major League.
Major League, yeah.
Yeah.
He did a liner for me at the end of that conversation, the Roger Dorn voice. It was hilarious, and and I even met him. I met him about a month after that in Orlando at Momentum, and he signed a couple baseballs for me, which was really cool. He put Roger Dorn on there and his signature, so it was definitely cool. And yeah, I was 9 when Major League came out. And I'm shocked that my mother let me watch that because it's not a kid's movie at all. And he even told me that. He's like, wow, how old were you when that movie came out? He's like, kind of gave me a look. He's like, hey, that was your mom's decision to let you watch that, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Who shared the kind of testimony that you think your audience, wouldn't forget after they listen to that?
There's been so many over the years and everything. I think one of the most recent ones that I did that I was really, taken back from, because, I grew up a fan of this band since I was a teenager, is Clint Lowry from Seven Dust. I did an interview with him in November, and Seven Dust is a mainstream rock band, so you wouldn't really equivalate, faith in Jesus with a lot of mainstream rock. But he found Jesus last year, and just sharing his testimony with me on that show, and how, God really did a huge work in his life and bringing him to know Jesus. It was just amazing. And those are the kind of testimonies I love. I really love seeing and hearing testimonies from people that had spent the majority of their life in either mainstream music or film, come to know Jesus, because that's obviously that's the goal for everybody, is that we want everybody to find Jesus at some point in time in their life. So for me, it's even more incredible knowing a history of somebody that's come from, a mainstream rock outfit and coming to know Jesus. And him and I have got a chance to be great friends since that interview. He actually texted me like 15 minutes before interview. He's going to see Brandon Lake on Sunday, so he's super excited and everything. But those are the kind of stories that I love hearing. And I've heard a lot of testimonies over the years. The ones that really hit me the most are the ones that are similar to mine. I came from a background. My dad was very verbally, physically, and mentally abusive to me as a kid. So having to overcome that kind of thing was very hard for me. But when I found Christ when I was 22, I was able to find the strength to forgive him for that. And so when I come across people that have had similar stories to me, those are the ones that are always very meaningful to me too, because they know exactly where I came from. And, it's always cool just to be able to share that. And if you've watched any of the Kingdom Builder stuff over the years, I'm very honest with my story, and I often, inject my own stories and things that I've gone through myself into my interviews to make it more personal, because I feel that the guests that I'm talking to, I think it really puts them at ease if I'm really honest about where I came from and where God has me now. So those are always really cool to be able to, talk with people about and share and just hear those stories that are similar to mine, or maybe, testimonies that are similar to people that are watching our videos. And that's really my big goal, is that I'm hoping that what they hear on there inspires and encourages them. And maybe if they're going through something that nobody knows about, I'm hoping that maybe something on there encourages and inspires them to put their faith and trust in God. And that, like he says in Scripture, he'll never leave or forsake us. So I'm thankful for conversations like that.
Great.
Yeah, what you said. I mean, I want to give you kudos too, though, because what you're doing really does have such an impact. And the story you just told too. I mean, you remember back in the day when Greg X. Volz left Petra and Jon Schlitt became the lead singer. That was long before the podcast era came along. And so what Petra did is they took Jon Schlitt out on tour with them into different regions to sit down and meet ministers, because he was coming out of a rock background and he had come to know Christ, and he was replacing Volz as the lead singer of Petra, but everybody wanted to stick him with a fork to see if he was done, and there was no arena to get that story out. And so Hartman, to his credit, they went out and they kind of took him on the road. But I mean, I had met him at the time. And I was a student minister at the time. But we actually got to hang out in the parking lot because my hair was as long as his. And I was the only one in the room that had the hair that long. And so he was leaning back on the car and he goes, man, this is exhausting. He goes, I don't get tired of telling the story about Jesus. He said, but he goes, we've been all over the country because people are concerned that I'm getting ready to tank Petra. And I mean, and had your show, had this arena been available for folks, that story gets told. I mean, because it's a real story. I mean, it needed to be told. But those are powerful moments. I mean, I remember sitting there thinking as I was talking to him, this is a guy who's young in the faith, who's really trying to do ministry, and is running into obstacles really from the Christian community. I mean, everybody's kind of judging this guy. And of course, we were just laughing about it. I said, as long as you get a haircut, man, we're good. So that's kind of how we ended our conversation. But those are powerful moments. So Jay, I mean, again, not that you need encouragement from us, but man, just keep that up because again, the inroads you're making and the audience that you're reaching with these folks, it really does matter. It's far bigger than we realize.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if I can share a quick story with you, Jeff, this was actually recently. I'm good friends with Jon Schlitt. I did an interview with them about Petra's brand new record, Hope, that came out in January, and that was their first new music. I think in I want to say it was 16 years since, or I know it was actually closer to 20 years since Petra put out brand new music. But I'm going to send this link to you because it's an unlisted link. It's not coming out officially until this summer, but I did 2 interviews in one for that conversation with John. We did the first part was about the Hope record, and then we went back and talked 40 years of Back to the Street, which was the first record that Jon Schlitt did with Petra. Yeah. And what a lot of people don't realize is that John, he was in the band Head East in the 70s, so he came from the mainstream rock community, but he was out of music completely for 5 or 6 years, didn't do anything with that. And then when he got saved, he was approached by Bob Hartman, put in the studio to do that first record right when Greg had left the group. And it's amazing because, John Elefante, to his credit, he was a producer for that record. Him and his brother Dino produced that first record with John. And when we were talking about this, he's like, I was just rusty. I had to shake off the dust because I hadn't sung in years. And he was telling me the stories. I'm like, that was one of my questions to him about that tour, about that first tour. I think he said that they went out with DeGarmo and Key was the group that they went out and toured with. And he said the biggest issue that he had on that tour was not really getting acclimated to the road because, he had toured for years, but the backlash from the church about, just Petra, there were people from churches picketing their shows saying that Petra was of the devil, rock music was of the devil and stuff. And he told me, he's like, I said, well, what was your response to that? I mean, how do you respond to people in the church criticizing what you're doing? You feel you've been called to go out there and do this for Christ. And then you have people from churches picketing your show saying that you are, you're the devil and all this other kind of stuff. And he's like, you know what? I never paid attention to that kind of stuff because I knew that we were doing what God called us to do. And it worked out, Those people stopped picketing I'm sure there's still people that picket their shows, but I just thought that was cool. And, I've got to know John over the years and everything, and just hearing those stories, that's the biggest thing I find satisfying about doing a lot of these interviews is hearing the stories that really haven't been told. Yeah. And it was funny that you mentioned Jon Schlitt and Petra because, I just talked with him last month, and I'm really excited about that conversation because I think people will be surprised when they hear some of the stuff that he had said about, getting back into it. Because he had no intention on getting back into music. He was ready to give up music. He was working in a machine factory and got a call out of the blue from Bob Hartman saying, Greg X Foles has left the band, but we're continuing and we need a lead singer and we think that person is you. So I can't wait to share that story. You're going to have your mind blown with that one.
Chris, I was just thinking while we take a break here in the show, wouldn't it be nice if you could go somewhere and shop and get high quality merchandise that would have a lasting impact? Wouldn't that be good?
I think that would be absolutely awesome.
Well, I've got a suggestion for you because what is your favorite saying?
Don't tap out.
Look at that. How about a Don't Tap Out t-shirt? And look at the logo on the back.
What's on the back? The Clash.
That's one of my favorite shows.
It's on my top list too.
And people could go and buy this from our store. Now you say, how do you get to the store? Well, right now there's a QR code on the screen. If they use that QR code, they can go and they can buy. Name something. We'll see if they can buy it there. What do we want to buy?
Probably. I want to get a long sleeve hoodie.
You know what? You can get a long sleeve hoodie there.
Really?
Yeah, and you know what else? If you had a baby tomorrow, you could get Clash baby gear at that same store. Yep, you can get that. All of it's available at the Clash store. So if you haven't been to the Clash store, you're one of the few people in America that hasn't been there yet.
Yeah.
And so check it out. Buy our stuff. It makes us money. It makes us happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Go to the Clash store.
I love hearing from our listeners. I have a website called themaskedsaint.com, and I get, people telling me things about the old wrestling days. I love to hear from them. I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, and I just never get tired of listening to people. And if you have not read The Masked Saint, I have that available on my website. I have the Christmas book, Harold's Heavenly Christmas. I have the last book that I wrote with a wrestling buddy called Mr. President. Pictures, whenever I was still in good shape. I have those available along with T-shirts, anything. But most of all, just love to hear from you. Jay, you mentioned one, but maybe there's others that have any guests moved from interviewees to real life friendships?
I'm surprised at how many of them develop into friendships outside of that. Because I'm always honest with people. When I interview people, Kingdom Builder and Today's Christian are considered media outlets. But what I always try to remind people when I do interviews or we do features or promotions and stuff is I always tell people, I'm like, I don't consider myself media. I consider myself an extension of their ministry. So I always reach out and say, hey, if you guys ever need anything, I don't want to feel that we're just asking things from you and things that you can do for us, but what can I do for you? Can I pray for you? Just anything you want. Everybody that I do interviews with has my cell phone number. And I encourage them, hey, if you ever need anything, just reach out. And it's actually surprising just over the last 20 years at how many people have gone from somebody I've interviewed to actually a long-term friendship where we keep connected with each other either through cell or through Facebook or whatnot. In fact, Chris, you're one of those guys. I remember the first time I met you back in 2015. We were at the International Christian Retail Show in Orlando, ICRS. And I remember meeting you, and Brent Grandstaff was the guy who played you in The Masked Saint. Mm-hmm. And I remember meeting you, and that was such a fun. I just remember having so much fun with you. You and I had lunch with Josh McDowell. I still have the picture of you having Josh McDowell in a headlock. It was hilarious. But I really enjoy things like that because I want things to go beyond when the camera stops rolling. I like to be able to maintain. And I think that's why I've been able to do so much over the last, 20 plus years in the industry is because of those relationships. You connect with one person and then they can connect you with another person. And it's kind of like just a circle of connections. And that's really how I get a lot of the stuff that I do is through connections and just relationships with people that I've interviewed, met, covered, promoted, all that kind of stuff over the years. So I think that's the biggest thing that I take away from it is that a lot of those interviews turn into friendships long term.
All right. Go ahead.
Now, I realize you'll interview a wide range of folks, actors, athletes, musicians. But is there an easier interview than others? Are athletes quicker to kind of, open up? Are actors real good with the gift of gab if they don't have a script? What have you found as far as the patterns as you've interviewed so many folks?
It really depends. Like I said earlier, the one thing I try to do is I try to ask questions that haven't been asked 100 times, which normally get, a better answer. Like, I try not to ask questions that just elicit a yes or no answer. I try to ask more open-ended questions, or maybe things that will get them thinking more. But the key is, like, when I'm doing an interview and stuff like that, getting somebody as comfortable as possible with the conversation from the very beginning sets the tone for the conversation. So if I can get their attention and, loosen up everything, loosen up the atmosphere to start the interview like that, I find that those interviews are the ones that are the best, that turn out the best, because they're more natural. And that's one thing. That's the other thing I try to, like, kind of infuse in the stuff I do, is I want the interviews to be laid back and just seem natural. I don't want it to seem contrived, or like I'm trying to, like, that I'm reading from a script. I have a script in front of me because I'm ADHD. So if I don't have my questions written down, I'll jump down many rabbit holes.
Oh, sure.
But I have bulleted points next to me and kind of stick to that. But then I let the conversations flow, and that's really what kind of drives them. And there's been very few that I've done over the years where the conversation hasn't been good. It's been kind of like, at the end, I'm like, oh, are people really going to want to watch that? It was kind of boring. But thankfully, there's not been too many of those. Most of them have been pretty engaging.
Yeah, the one with me.
No, I've done 2 interviews with Chris. We did one. The first one was at ICRS, but Chris, you remember when we did that second interview? It was at a church.
Yeah,
I think in Zephyr Hills. It was like in their little library there.
Yeah, where I was.
But
speaking.
no, I always enjoyed that.
Yep. Well, which guest best describes the cost of living boldly for Christ in the entertainment or sports? And you might have already answered that with the guy from Petra, but just curious.
There are so many of them. One that comes to mind that I've interviewed a couple times, and I meet him every time their tour comes through, but John Cooper from Skillet is probably one of the ones that he has a dual platform. Skillet is they're like the biggest rock band in Christian music, but they also do mainstream tours and stuff. And John himself does a podcast called Cooper Stuff, and he takes on a lot of subjects that a lot of people in the church don't really want to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of things that are like considered taboo, that are like, okay, even pastors and pulpits probably won't really talk about them on Sundays. But John really takes a lot of those like controversial things and really puts a spiritual and scriptural backing to why we should take interest in these things as a church. And he's one of the ones that I've interviewed quite a few times. I've met him quite a few times over the last 20 years. And he's very bold in his faith. He lives his faith out. He practices what he preaches. And I really like people like that are not afraid to stand for the truth, even if it might lose them some fans on social media or stuff like that. And those are the people that I'm drawn to, the people that are really warriors for the faith, that really don't care what the world thinks of them. They're going to speak the truth, whether people want to hear it or not. And I've been like that. I don't do it as much on my podcast, but like on Facebook and stuff. If somebody asks me a question, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to be honest with them. They may not always like my answer. They may not always like what I have to say, but I root my responses in Scripture. I'm like, if God's against something, then there's really no way around it. You really have to speak truth, because if you're not speaking truth, then who is? The Bible says if our gospel is hid to those that are perishing. Yeah. So sometimes we have to tell people things that they really don't want to hear. It's part of life.
4, 3. We hope you're having a good time. And it's fun talking to Jay. He knows and has met and interviewed so many people. And so I'm having a blast. I hate for it to end, but we got to get out of this episode.
Right.
But let's have Jay back.
Right.
And keep going in our next episode. What do you think?
I was going to suggest the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
All right, let's do it.
So don't forget to tune in next week for part 2 of this interview with Jay Heilman, Kingdom Builders. And have a great week, and don't tap out.